Greetings, everyone. Tim Anderson here, aka Renfell, and welcome to today's episode in the Project Dramond series, which is all about the elves, part two. Hot coffee on a Tuesday morning is a delicious thing. So, this is March 23rd. The first post on elves came out last Tuesday, and I kind of gave the overview of the elves as a race, how they fit into the structure of Project Dramond and the world lore. And today's post is all about the four different subtypes of elves and how they came to be. Now, this is important because we're going back to the root of kind of the elven race here and saying if all elves were of one race at one point in time, how did we get to the four subtypes? And that's important. It's part of the overall world history and lore that's being created for the rulebook, which in turn inspires the module for the campaign as well as the book series. I'm currently in the middle of drafting the history and backstory for the Elven Civil War, which is something that happened after the humans came north from the southern regions, and that's all being worked on now and will be part of it. Possibly it won't be next week because next week is going to be halflings and humans, but probably the week after that I'll be sharing on Patreon for subscribers the Elven Civil War elements and the history of the humans and the Quantum Wars and what brought them north from their regions in the south. So stay tuned for all that stuff. If you haven't already done so and you want to know more about what I'm talking about, because this video and all of the previous videos are all about Project Dramond. This post in particular is about the four Elven subtypes, and the post about that is linked below. That's the post for subscribers over on Patreon. Now, if you want to know more about Project Dramond in general, also just check out the links below because it'll take you to the Patreon page where you can read up about what this project is, who's working on it, the different aspects of the project, and the various updates that are happening all throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check the TikTok link below because that's where our daily little snippets are shared, as well as join the Discord because we're doing lots of stuff there and having lots of different conversations. And of course, the playlist here on YouTube, which has all of the other previous videos in the Project Dramond series. Without further ado, another sip of coffee here. Elves. Every world needs them. They are often very similar to all of the elves that have come before. It's kind of rare to see uh, a fantasy story, a fantasy world that will break away from the norms in terms of what elves are and how they kind of function within society. We almost always see elves portrayed as slightly arrogant, um, elusive, mysterious, immortal, or very long lived. Um, and many of those things are good starting points. I don't think there's any reason, there's that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think that some of that holds true when you're talking about the elven archetypes because they do work well. And that's why that kind of those archetypes have been used throughout so many fantasy projects because it works. It's not something where you have to reinvent the wheel to create a new variant of that. But of course, everyone always creates their own versions, and we're no different in that sense. Um, Again, going back to the first episode on elves that I did, the primary source of inspiration for my elves is not Tolkien, it's not Forgotten Realms, it's not any of those places. I first and foremost looked at two sources, which is the Dragonlance Chronicles and their many different versions of elves, and then first and foremost, the or more importantly, I should say, in my mind, are the elves from Tad Williams' his book Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. There are some things that I really loved from there, which I talked about in the previous episode. Like the Civil War rift between the two elven archetypes. I love that mythology. I think it works really well. Um, his version of it is different. Obviously, you don't you use places as sources of inspiration. You're not just directly copying them. My version of why and how and everything else they split is completely different, but the core aspect of that is you have elves who split because of humans. I love that component of it, and I definitely have woven that into Project Dramond. I also used that in the Saga of Leucemia in Echoes of the Past in Book 1 to define the Elenhai and Eldenai. Something else that I really love from his version is the idea that um, elves are susceptible to iron. Um, Now, I don't have that in Project Dramond, but we're probably going to be doing some. We're dealing with the humans having come from the far south, and when they came, they brought with them quantum technology. And this is the counter to magic. So, elves had magic because they're from the earth and they're from the elements, and so they have access to that natural elemental magic. Whereas humans came and brought with them quantum technology. Now, that quantum technology gives them a very similar level of power, and it's one of these systems where it's an equal power. So, from the elves' standpoint, they view this as a direct. I don't want to say, some of them view it as a direct threat, but it's one of those things where I just think it's a really cool way to say humans are just as powerful in a certain way as elves, even though they don't live as long. And there's a reason why elves fear men. I think that's a very interesting component to put in because we don't see that in Tolkien. The elves in Tolkien do not fear mankind. Um, they are definitely superior to mankind. Now, mankind in sheer numbers can be a threat to the elves of Middle Earth, but as a general rule, the men of Numenor who were strong, long-lived, so on and so forth, had alliances with the elves of old. But we're talking about like the men of Bree-land. Yeah, the elves don't really view the men of Bree as anything noteworthy. They're not a threat. They're not anything. They're just men, weak weak-willed, um, poor bloodline, that kind of thing. But it's a little different in my world, in the world that we are creating for Project Dramond, because we want the elves to fear mankind, and there's a reason for that. So we dive into a little bit of that. In the backstory of the elves and in the Elven Civil War that's being written, and that's com- it's gonna continue to impact how I modify the archetypes. So what people are seeing in the Patreon post that just went out today is the first draft of the Elven subtypes and archetypes, and how those are going to be changing slightly um, as we continue to draft the Elven backstory and the rest of the world storyline. So hopefully you enjoy this type of stuff. And if you do, check out the links below. Follow along over at Patreon. Pick up a subscription. Join us in Discord. We have lots of conversations about this stuff on a daily basis. And also check out the daily updates that we're doing on TikTok for concept art, snippets of work that are being done on the adventure game. We just did a big public post on Patreon about the progress over the last 3 weeks. Check that out. Lots of fun stuff for you to sink your teeth into. If you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon so that you get updates for future pieces of content about Project Dramond. And stick around. Wednesday, tomorrow, we've got an update for folks. My wife is going to be joining my brother and I. She doesn't always join those sessions, but this week we're doing an update for people as opposed to a brainstorming session. And Chris is going to be sharing some of the pieces of concept art she's been working on, and Joey and I are going to be talking about some of the things that we're working on. So we're kind of basically we're doing stand-ups, but we're doing them in a public space through here on YouTube. So hopefully you enjoy that. You'll stick around and come watch that when it comes out. So thanks everybody. See you in the next episode. Stay safe, stay healthy, and safe gaming.